The following is a sponsored message from Interfaith Community Services. Voice of San Diego is a nonprofit, and a majority of our budget comes from listeners and readers like you. But we also depend on revenue from grants and advertisers to maintain independence and produce more of the hard-hitting journalism you expect from us. Interfaith Community Services is North San Diego County's largest provider of social services. With programs ranging from food, housing, employment, youth services, addiction recovery, and more, Interfaith serves over 17,000 of their neighbors in need each year. Headquartered in Escondido, their mission is to help people help themselves. And to do that, they need your support. Visit www.interfaithservices.org to learn more.
Welcome to those of you listening on News Radio 600 Cocoa. This is the Voice of San Diego on the podcast. My name is Scott Lewis. I'm here with my friend Andrew Keatts.
What's up, buddy?
How are you?
Good. Missed you guys last week.
Did you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we missed you.
Good.
My other friend Sara Libby.
Hello.
Hi, how are you? One of the things you missed, Andy, was our employee party.
Mm-hmm.
You
I
did.
did.
It was fun. Good spirit, right? It was raining cats and dogs.
Yes.
During it.
The thunder rattled the windows, man.
There were car alarms going off.
It was something.
It was quite something.
But we had a good spirit, a lot of good just feeling. It's a good night. I think part of it was that you were gone. But there was one moment, I think people felt a little bit too free. Iris, our development director, approached me. She was walking with Lisa, and she had a pie in her hand. We were cleaning up for the night. And the pie, she's holding it like this, and she's very well done. She was like, something's wrong with this pie. It smells weird. Does this smell weird to you? She put it right up next to me, and I bent down like a total mark.
And Mark is the right word.
I'd like to give you credit that as it was happening, it was less obvious. But boy, when you retell it, it sure seems like you deserve to get a pie in the face for falling for that.
Yeah, so I wasn't there, but it does seem like he
oh man,
come off like a real doofus.
So she smacked me with it, and I was shook. But it wasn't as bad as it could be because Lisa was walking with her, and apparently Lisa Halverstadt was like,
I bet Lisa would have been like, that's not appropriate.
I don't think you should do this.
Yeah, I really.
This is
and
impolite.
Iris was like, no, I'm going to do this. And she's like, no, don't do it. And apparently it was this whole drama.
So she half-did it?
So she half-did it.
My takeaway from this is that you definitely deserve to get a pie in your face. And also, Lisa probably deserves one at some point.
Actually, now that I think about it, I haven't noticed this before. Did you know that if your hand is bigger than your face, that means you might have cancer? Did you ever know that?
That's good. Yeah. It was. I have to put. I wish there was a video of how well she acted it. It was something else. It was very impressive.
I do buy that.
Anyway,
credit to Iris.
I taught my son it at home, and he loves it. He's like,
isn't there like a whole game where there's like pie in the face? Isn't that like a children's game you buy? I'm still learning the world of like baby and child toys, but I think there's an entire game predicated on like some food item gets shoved in your face.
Well, he was really stoked about it. Got this little fake pie from their kitchen that he has, and
it's a free gift idea for you.
Yeah. Okay. I'll check it out. So anyway. Big winner among 8-year-olds, the pie in the face thing.
Typically the type of people who would be gullible enough to fall for that sort of thing.
They're the ones, yeah. Typically you learn those lessons when you're pre-adolescent, but I have not. Iris, good. She does improv. She's
there you go, yeah.
And she actually has handed me something that we need to talk about. This is the end of year campaign, so this is we get like a tremendous amount of our money in the last 6 weeks of the year. What are you smiling about?
I'm smiling because I was instructed specifically to make sure you don't go off script, and it just seems...
You've already put the script
like
away.
You put it away.
You're just going
and
on.
You're not really looking at it.
Just read it.
I'm fine. I am fine.
I'm worried you're going to say we're going to give all the money away to a different nonprofit or something weird.
I asked if this is what I do. I'm fine.
Hey, could you do me a favor? What does it say on that paper?
So it's a very important time. We really
now
love...
you've overcorrected.
Abort. Abort.
I just wanted to take a quick second to say thanks for listening to this podcast. Of course, you want us to keep doing this podcast, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You want to, thanks, guys. You want to hear who we interview in 2019. You want to find out who our new heroes and goats will be. Are we going to keep doing that next year?
I'd rather not, but we probably will. I'll continue to lose that gambit.
So to guarantee all that happens, we need you. You know, we're an investigative nonprofit. That means we rely on people like you. I'm talking to you out there, you in your ears. The people who read this work and listen, all that stuff. Right now, we're working on a goal to keep everything on track. By the end of the year, we're trying to raise $175,000. It sounds like a lot, I know, but we are halfway there. So if you can invest in us and this show, take a moment and do it. It makes a huge difference.
But do it like now.
Right
now. You've got your phone on you. You're listening to it through your phone.
Now.
Pull your phone out, throw us the money, and then move on with your life. You'll feel better too.
voiceofsandiego.org/donate. She has voiceofsandiego.com here. It's like,
good thing you went off script.
Yeah, voiceofsandiego.org/donate. Thank you very much, and make Iris happy. Everybody's happy if Iris is happy, right?
Good job. Yes. That was great.
Thank you.
Way to go.
Later in the show, we have Sean Elo coming in. He is just inaugurated today as one of 5 members of the San Diego Community College District Trustees, Board of Trustees. And he, of course, had quite a path to there. They didn't make it easy for him. Did it? And we'll talk about that race and about what the community college does and what his plans and priorities are for that. But first, we wanted to update about a story we did on Monday that's already had impact. Sarah, what is it?
Yeah, so this is part of an investigation that we've been working on all year long about sexual misconduct in schools. And this week we wrote about one teacher in particular who had racked up a lot of misconduct investigations when he was working as a public school teacher in Oceanside. If you remember, we only have access to records that are like substantiated incidents of misconduct. Mm-hmm. So 2 of those involved incidents with 11-year-old students that left them like visibly injured, including forcing a banana down one of their throats for some reason. It's pretty disturbing. And then a separate investigation in which several of his female colleagues accused him of sexual harassment and said that they felt unsafe around him. So this was back in a period that ended in 2011, and Oceanside was moving to fire this teacher when they struck a deal that he would resign. And like so many of these cases that we've seen, part of that deal included an agreement that they wouldn't talk about any of these incidents to prospective employers. And wouldn't you know it, he got some employment after that. So his teaching credential was revoked as a result of these incidents in 2013, and we discovered that he was still employed at a local private school in Claremont called Coastal Christian Academy.
Because, let me interject here, private schools do not require the same teaching credential that public schools do.
Yes, they do not. They've told us that many of them have them anyway, but it's not a requirement. And when our intern, Kayla, who reported this great story, reached out to the superintendent of that school, he said he was happy to have this teacher on staff, wasn't worried about it, thought he was absolutely the right person of the job. And his reasoning was that he had never been criminally charged, with any crimes as a result of these incidents, which is kind of a strange bar to have when you're talking about working with children.
Yeah, so the reporters, Kayla Jimenez, did a great job on this story. Came out Monday. And then he puts out a statement after that saying, you might have heard about this small local internet news source.
Yeah,
that
great
did this piece.
Tagline for us.
I'm not really worried about it, though. I'm not concerned about it. But then it developed a little further.
Yeah, so that was a message that he sent to, I think, the PTA or parents at the school. And within a day after that, not just the teacher in this story, but also that superintendent have now resigned.
Wow. So I've seen impact. I don't usually see it that fast. Kayla did a great job nailing it all down. And they put out a new story or a new announcement. They put it on our own Facebook page to make sure we shared it, which was the new interim chief saying, hey, these two have left and we're going to work on what we do now. So, wow.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But that gets back to that point. A lot of these settlements with teachers, that it's so hard to push them out that they end up agreeing on a settlement deal that often includes, we won't tell anybody what we found out about what you were doing.
Right.
Yeah, and the other thing is like often the lasting repercussion is the revocation of the teaching credential.
Mm-hmm.
There are two caveats to that. One, you can still teach in private schools without a credential, and two, often it takes a long time for that credential to be revoked, during which period people often continue to teach, get jobs at other schools or substitute teach or something along those lines.
Right.
Yeah, and I can see how there could be an argument, maybe depending on the incident or the history of an individual teacher, that, you know, maybe there should be a chance for them in some sort of private school capacity. But I would say that would hinge on whether people were aware of that history. And it really sounds like in this case, they were not. I think the superintendent certainly was aware that he had this history of incidents, but probably the parents weren't. And so it just seems like if you make the decision that this is the right teacher for your staff, that it should be like with eyes wide open.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So check out that reporting and the fallout this week. Again, Kayla Jimenez did a great job on that. Very proud of her. And she followed up well, and now we've got impact. Fascinating. All right, so this week I did some of my own writing.
Hey, good job, bud.
My sons and daughter still don't know what I do. I think they just think I type.
If it makes you
You're
feel
like
any
that
better.
Kermit the Frog emoji where you type.
Yeah,
really
exactly.
hard.
Yeah.
It makes you feel any better. My mom doesn't know what I do either.
Isn't that funny? You travel like your in-laws or your distant family, and they're like, "So it's a little online publication."
The only time they get excited
was
is
it a
if,
small online news outlet?
Yeah.
the only time they're even a little bit satisfied is when they see some sort of TV clip.
Exactly.
That I've done.
My grandma.
It's like that's validation.
My grandma. She said, I saw her just last month, and she said, "You know, I always dreamed you would be on TV. I'm so proud of you." And I was like, "Thank you."
That's the part. That's the most significant thing we do.
It's funny how it goes from "I don't know what you do" to when you appear on TV, you are famous.
Yes.
You are wildly successful.
Yes,
you have appeared on TV.
It's finally happened. So at the end of November, San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer called a meeting at the U.S. Grand Hotel. They should just invite me to these things by now.
I feel like you have a meeting beat.
This is your beat, summit beat.
The
secret summit beat.
Come to Jesus beat.
Right. Well, I love it.
Yeah.
It's fun. But they had a meeting, and I was actually reporting on a story about what the future of San Diego's Republicans and business interests. Now, let me run something by you. I've been having trouble trying to figure out what we call the right of center coalition.
I'm not sure that what you've settled on is what I would have settled on.
Okay, let's talk about it for a second. So, because I was thinking like right of center coalition is weird. Nobody understands what I'm talking about with that. Business interest doesn't feel right because I think businesses include labor unions sometimes. It's not always clear to me that like it has to be diametrically opposed as like a conservative entity, right? Okay. So
by that standard, I still have issues with what you've arrived at.
Fair enough. So I've settled on capitalists.
Yeah, right.
Which capitalists are fine.
Yeah, I mean, like Elizabeth Warren is a capitalist,
right?
So
I'm a capitalist. I just run a nonprofit news organization.
So,
sure.
So what are you arguing here?
I don't know. What do we call them?
I think they're like business groups.
Yeah, I think business interests, like functionally, it makes the most sense.
Yeah.
Business political interests, though?
Yeah.
Because there's like chamber and like biocom.
But here's the thing, is they actually all are business groups. The Lincoln Club is a group of like business owners.
Okay.
The Building Industry Association is a group of business owners. The Downtown Partnership,
bring capitalists back into it. I just would love to use capitalists
because of what we just described. It like the people on the left of the spectrum are also capitalists.
Same on business.
But these are actually business groups.
All right, I don't know what to do. I'm just
like they actually. The Building Industry Association is legitimately a group of businesses who are in the business of development.
All right. I'm still it's my brain. It just hurt. So, all right, fine. Well, all retired capitalists. It just felt really good.
Just picture like the Monopoly guy.
Man. Yeah,
that's the only thing.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just Republicans there. Betsy Brennan was there. She's the Downtown Partnership. Brian Pepin from the Lincoln Club. Tom Sudbury, the developer and donor. A lot of Republicans, of course. Ashley Hayek, she was here. She's a fundraiser for Republicans. Tony Kravarik. They all get together, and basically the premise is, hey, we're going to talk about this mauling we had in the November elections. And what are we going to do? And see, that I had already been reporting out a story like, what are they going to do? Because the thing that always comes to my mind is Lori Zaff, city councilwoman for District 2 along the coast, Point Loma, OB, Mission Beach, and PB. And she loses
PB, OB, and Mission B.
Mission B.
That's what you just said.
Are we making that a thing?
That could be a thing. Go ahead.
Sorry.
It's okay.
So she lost by 16 points.
Drubbing.
And, I think a lot of people who were gathered there are kind of like, well, there wasn't a major scandal for her. She may have been able to hustle more. She could have worked it better. She'd been better in touch, but she wasn't totally out of touch. Or it didn't seem like to them that she was 16 points out of touch.
Or even, it's not like she cast any like super unpopular votes. She sided with the district on short-term vacation rentals.
Right.
She had like, in many ways,
the community plan.
Like there's nothing that stands out as like a major misstep,
right?
Let alone a scandal.
But she lost by 16 points. And so the thinking is like, well, Trump. Yeah. So all the research seems to point to this was the first time this area had a chance to go to the polls after Trump was elected. And they went 66% turnout in the region, 61% in that district. And compare that to 45% in 2014, the last midterm. They turned out because they were angry at Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one thing you had a comparison in your story to Chris Keatts, who did survive. And what's interesting about that is that he did have a scandal associated with him. You can debate whether it was legitimate or whatever, but like there was something that people could, reasonably be mad about. But I think that drives home that Trump really was a factor.
Oh yeah, and so I talked to John Neested. He said, look, she did well with people who liked Trump. She did well with the very few people who slightly disliked him or slightly liked him, and she just tanked with people who had a very unfavorable rating of Trump. And if you were seen as giving, this is his quote, if you're seen as giving any quarter to Donald Trump, those people with very unfavorable views of Trump were going to vote against you, and that's the hill Lori Zaff found herself trying to climb. She obviously didn't climb it. And so then that brings the question up is, can a Republican succeed if Trump is defining Republican? And that's what a lot of these conversations are about now. And, I talked about Keatts a lot in this story. It seems like he had a pretty strong connection to the district. As Dan Rottenstreich on the left said, like he, if you were able to define yourself in a way that was different than Trump, you have a chance, but otherwise your identity is going to get kind of subsumed by it.
Yeah, I mean, so folks in City Hall will tell you that Chris Keatts' office has done a commendable job being especially present in the district at the town council meetings and community planning group meetings. There's always a representative there. He's got a young staff that's been, pulling each of them going to 2 meetings a night, so that there's always a reminder of Chris Keatts, the guy who filled your pothole, as opposed to Chris Keatts, the local avatar for Donald Trump's national reputation. So I think that's one part of it. The other thing, and I don't expect anybody in the Republican Party today to feel especially comforted by this, but in 2010, Republicans locally everywhere ran against Barack Obama. The problem that they ran into is that once Barack Obama was not on the ticket, you had to run on something else.
Mm-hmm.
And so, sure, right now, Donald Trump's presence is a major problem for Republicans, but he won't be here forever. He may not be here after 2 years, or if it's 6 years, he won't be here after that. And so the question becomes whether he sticks to them forever or whether he's only an anchor as long as he is on the ballot or dominates the party. 2 years ago when I wrote about how Republicans locally were coping with Donald Trump, what Jason Rowe, Republican strategist, told me was Donald Trump is a national version of 187 on steroids, which is somebody who, 187 is the California law that stripped welfare benefits from immigrants, that tanked the Republican Party in California for a generation. It's ongoing. Continues to be the case that they've never recovered from that. And so one version of events in the future is that that's what Donald Trump has done to the party nationally. The other is that it's the situation with Barack Obama in 2010 is a better analogy, that he's an anchor on Democrats as long as he's on the ballot, but he won't be on the ballot forever.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't on the ballot this year, I mean, there's that.
Well, neither was Obama in 2010, but
yeah,
he's...
Yeah.
When you're the standard bearer of the party,
sure,
you're always on the ballot.
And
right?
so the part of the question I had was, can Republicans locally tolerate somebody distancing themselves as much as they might need to make it clear that they aren't subsumed by his identity and the affiliation they have with him there? Or do they start just picking Dems, or do they even go further and start just going independent? Now, so they were all thinking that there would be this big reckoning at this meeting, but apparently the mayor's staff just got up and presented all these things about how great the mayor has been. And
seems like he's kind of bad at these meetings that he convenes.
Kind of a tin ear on this. I think a lot of them were looking forward to a reckoning. At one point, Councilman Scott Sherman was so frustrated, he's like, we got to just get back to ballot measures about fiscal issues, stuff like that. That didn't sail well. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about was this research that was presented there. So Ryan Klumper, he's been in here a few times. He talked about, he made a presentation about the district. I hadn't looked at these numbers before, but there's only one district in the whole city right now that has a slight Republican majority, 2 percentage points. That's in District 5. But all the districts are dominated by no-party preference folks. And he pointed out since 2016, 263,000 voters have registered, 103,000 signed up as Democrats, 40,000 as Republicans, and 120,000 as no-party preference. The new no-party preference is just surging. The Democrats are holding steady, and the Republicans are sinking.
Bottoming out, basically.
So there's a lot of data there. All right, we are going to come back and talk about our hero and go to the week. We also have Sean Elo, the community college trustee, coming in. And again, please consider supporting Voice of San Diego and all this work that we do, investigative work, at voiceofsandiego.org/donate. This part of the show is done in partnership with News Radio 600 Cocoa.
This Voice of San Diego podcast is sponsored in part by Competitive Edge Research. As a nonprofit news organization, Voice of San Diego depends on our members, foundations, and sponsors like Competitive Edge Research. We are very grateful for all of our supporters, and we will recognize their support during the show. Competitive Edge Research, San Diego's premier public opinion research firm, sponsors this podcast because they like good journalism as much as they like good polling. Since 1987, Competitive Edge has helped clients see the why buried deep within the numbers. Competitive Edge designs comprehensive research studies, collects bulletproof data, and employs robust analytics so you'll understand why things are the way they are. Competitive Edge. Know what to do. And if you like Voice of San Diego's work and want to become a sponsor, contact us at development@voiceofsandiego.org.
Welcome to The People's Reporter, a Voice of San Diego feature where we gather questions from listeners like you, then answer those questions. I'm Lisa Halverstad.
And I'm Adriana Heldes. This week, we tackled the question that won our latest voting round.
This one comes from VOSD reader and contractor Ashley Lewis. She's done lots of great web and graphics work for us.
Yeah, we love Ashley. So she asked us, San Diego is the city of transplants. In other words, people who aren't from here. What percentage of people who live here were actually born here? And how does that compare to other major cities?
So after this question won our voting round, I immediately reached out to Dowell Myers at USC, who's considered one of the state's foremost demographers. He graciously agreed to help dig into some census survey data, specifically the 2017 American Community Survey.
And what exactly did he find?
The most specific data that he could track down shows that an estimated 46% of San Diegans were born in California, which means that more than half of San Diegans were born somewhere else.
Wow. So we definitely are a city of transplants.
Sure are.
So what about other major cities in the country?
Well, Governing Magazine had dug into the census survey data from 2010 a while back, and they pulled details for cities nationwide. So I reviewed the data for San Diego and other top 20 cities to see how we stacked up. It turns out that only a handful of big cities had smaller homegrown populations than San Diego. Those cities included San Francisco, Seattle, and Phoenix.
So could this change anytime soon?
Myers says it is changing. He told me that a lot of out-of-towners moved to San Diego and California around World War II in the 1980s, for example, and our high housing prices do look to be changing some trends. He predicts that the share of San Diegans originally from this city will continue to rise and the percentage from elsewhere will continue to drop.
Well, I guess time will tell.
We'll see. That does it for this week. Now it's your turn. We'd love your questions about San Diego.
Yeah, we'll choose the best ones that we get and ask readers to vote for their favorites. Then we'll go out and investigate the answers and share what we learn. Go to voicessandiego.org/People's Reporter or text us at 619-202-9051. Your question could be featured in an upcoming episode.
We are back. Okay, we're going to have our hero and goat in a second, but I do want to just keep a couple of thoughts going. One of the interesting discussions that the folks formerly known as capitalists were talking about. Capitalists. It's good. Capitalism is good. All right, so they were, they're kind of trying to decide, like, well, another option is just to pick a side in the Dems.
Yeah.
Like to find candidates within the Democrats who support the free market ideals they care about, all those other things. And sort of, pretend this is Chicago or Philadelphia or whatever and just pick a side within that party.
Yeah. And so one possible outcome is that in certain districts, they have no choice but to do that.
Right.
I mean, what are you going to do? Just like write off D8 and D4 and D9? Right. Or do you enter into those districts recognizing that it's going to be a Democrat and you just pick the one that you can live with most? I think that's basically what they did in D8 this year.
Except for they put far fewer resources into her race. Vivian Moreno ran. She won. She was the Democrat more, supportive of their principles than the other one, Antonio Martinez. Labor was all in on Antonio Martinez.
Right.
And so the thinking was, we're going to support her. But they didn't throw that much money to her. No. And the question, I think, in the minds of a lot of people in these meetings are, well, what do we really think? Why are we putting $800,000 or $1 million into Lori Zaff and only $30,000 to $100,000 into Vivian Moreno? There's a pretty good argument Vivian Moreno being elected would have a more significant impact on the citywide decisions that could be made than Lori Zaff versus Jen Campbell.
I mean, especially if you're the Building Industry Association,
right.
Say, like separate them out
housing
from the rest of the housing in particular. Like, I don't think there's any question that Vivian Moreno is more aligned with you than Lori Zaff was.
Right. And I mean, Lori Zaff throughout even the campaign was shutting down height limits, all kinds of stuff to stop the free development of housing.
And, so one of the questions in the primary that we dealt with Labor's support of Nathan Fletcher was that they explained to you was this isn't just one vote that we're trying to occupy. We're trying to christen a leader of a movement that's going to be around for a while. Like, Vivian Moreno has been an unapologetic YIMBY. I sat in a room, I moderated a panel and watched her in a room full of people that was very supportive of rent control, and her just unapologetically tell them that she did not support rent control and why. And it does seem that a person who's willing to do that and has that set of beliefs is maybe about not just on a one vote question, but as a long-term investment makes more sense for the Building Industry Association than Lori Zaff, whose major mark on city politics over the last 4 years, I should say, was shutting down attempts to deregulate housing construction.
Yeah, that's true. So there was another side discussion, of course. Ashley Hayek, who's here, she brought up that the Republican Party itself needs to learn some lessons about things, and and she kind of put on the spot Tony Kravarik, the chairman of the Republican Party, who was there. She had kind of raised her hand as somebody who might consider taking that role, as he had already said he was going to step down from that role. And that caused a little bit of a drama last week, we reported on. And then he ended up deciding to run for re-election, staying in that role. But then also they're discussing paying him. And I think it fits into this story because the balance between the Trump side and the actual reality on the ground in some of these districts is going to be so hard to pull off. I think he wants money to try to keep pulling it off.
Yeah.
Yeah, her take in your story kind of surprised me since it was pretty sober and it was so different than when she was here on the podcast and was, aggressively defending the Republican Party and what it had done.
It didn't come across as like an introspective, we've got a lot to figure out.
I mean, part of that could have to do with the fact that the things she highlighted as bright spots for the party, those races that she assumed they had won, particularly 2 congressional races in Orange County, since went to Democrats after we recorded that.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe, it's just a result of further reflection, but it really felt to me like she had a different take when it was just those folks.
That's part of the lesson here, of course, is like the mayor, there's a lot of tension between what we talk about a lot, where like there's a lot of people just not willing to talk about what they're vulnerable about right now,
Yes.
And so I think in behind closed doors or whatever, like there might be willing, I think a lot of them thought there might be more of a like, hey, something's not right, let's address it. But the mayor in particular wasn't interested in that. And, I think, again, going back throughout his tenure, that's been one of the main problems is like acknowledging something is wrong and then working to deal with it, or acknowledging you made a mistake and then working to deal with it. And so I was told after this, I did the story, it published on Thursday, I got a text saying there's going to be a lot more meetings, probably smaller, probably more come to Jesus type stuff. So we'll see how that goes.
Follow-ups for you on your
Meetings beat.
Sorry, I got to bring this up. This week we got the news that the city of Oakland, California, filed a lawsuit against the Raiders and the NFL for antitrust violations and extortion. I was beside myself. I read every word I could find about it. Wouldn't that be fun to sue the NFL?
Seems pretty pointless.
I think it'd be fun.
Seems kind of like a waste of time and resources.
Well, we don't have to worry about it. The city of San Diego, in its infinite wisdom, signed a lease in 2006 that waived its rights to sue the Chargers for those same reasons were the Chargers ever to move. They really did that. I can point you to the lease if you want. I think San Diegans are just genetically unable to do those kinds of fun things. We can't pull it off.
Yeah. Well.
Anyway, the news triggered the NFL world to speculate that the Raiders would not finish their last year in Oakland.
Maybe coming down here.
Holy moly, whoa Nelly, golly jeepers. Maybe we could have the NFL back in San Diego, even just for one season. And just like that, local sports radio had content for an entire day.
Yeah.
But what
I didn't listen to Sports Talk that day. Was it?
Was it good?
That was all it was.
Like, yeah, we get to the NFL. What have we become? A city that's dreaming of having the Raiders for like one season? How do we even
We've
show
got San Diego Fleet, baby. It's almost Fleet season.
How do we even show our face when we were at a party of like other cities? Like,
it's rough.
Jesus, San Diego. Sorry, man. It's been a rough run. You look good though.
All right.
All right. So our hero of the week.
This one goes
to our friends at the DC press corps, right?
Yeah, they're just hustling for the scoops this week.
I love when they help us out.
Big Scott Wong. This is hard because Scott Wong's a good guy.
He's a great guy. Former colleague of mine.
He's at the Hill, right?
Yes.
So he tweets the other day, scoop, all caps.
All caps.
Centrist Democrat Scott Peters mulls bid for San Diego mayor in 2020. We are looking at it, quote, says Team Peters. So
brand new information.
Now, of course, we had Peters on.
You always got to tip your hat to a scoop from one of your crosstown rivals.
Although I think there was like 200% too much Scots in this situation.
Scott Lewis reminds Scott
You
Wong.
could leave. That would give us 33% fewer Scots.
We had Scott Peters in this very room a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, where he said he's totally considering it. Straight for him, not his.
It was actually stronger than what he told them.
Yes. He also, appeared on our I'm probably running for mayor panel.
That's right. in PolitiFest. So obviously a little tongue in cheek. We kid the DC press corps. It's funny what they think is scoops or not, but probably in their world it was a scoop. They gotta listen locally. Yeah. Our GOAT of the week.
You lose. Good day, sir.
So for 2 years, city officials have insisted that the city has no water lines that are made of lead. Well, this week, Rai Rivard and NBC revealed new data that shows the city has no idea what 192,000 of its water lines are made of. No idea at all.
That's an enormous share of its water lines, to be clear.
To be specific, quote, "Wow, that's a lot," said an official in the state's Water Resources Board.
Yes.
So state law requires
yes.
that the city replace lines that may be made of lead.
Yeah, or whose origin is unknown,
right.
Which 192,000 of these are.
Leaving the city potentially with a liability to replace all of those 192,000 lines that could total $1 billion in the coming years.
That's billion with a B.
But anyway, they had no problem insisting that they had none before.
None. Zero.
It's a little gap, a delta between 0 and 192,000.
It's the spectrum.
It's also worth pointing out that, so everyone's required to do this, right?
Yeah.
Other cities had between 0 and 1% of their lines that they didn't know the origin of, including Los Angeles, which has far more of these than we do. So we have I'm not good at fractions, 60 through 66%, whatever.
Good job. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's probably wrong. An
Did
enormous
you just say
share.
A number?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
More than 50%.
Very good.
More than 50%.
We don't know the origin.
It's a big number.
Yeah.
It's a big number.
All right. Well, stay tuned. We got Sean Elo coming in and talk to him about that race for a community college district. Interesting guy, interesting background. And thanks for all your support. Again, you can go to boysandiego.org/donate and help us make all this possible. He is the newly elected member of the board of, trustees of the San Diego Community College District. Sean Elo, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Appreciate you coming into the probably the most important, probably the most royal, maybe
prolific.
Yeah.
Royal?
The best.
Certainly the best.
Let's retire royal.
Royal's questionable.
Podcast studio in this quadrant of downtown. The UT has a podcast now, so I don't know if all my superlatives...
We're going to have to keep adding qualifiers.
So what started as just a joke about the fact that there were none has actually transitioned into actual competitiveness.
Right, exactly. So we might have to rate it. Sean, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, the last one I did was in a living room. So this is right, at least on par with that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
Right up there with living rooms. All right. So, Sean, you not only got elected to that board. Now, tell us, how many people are on the board of directors or the trustees there?
5.
Okay, so you are one of 5. And how many schools does that cover?
So the community college district has 3 colleges. The 3 that most folks know: San Diego City College, Mesa College, and then Miramar. And there's 7 continuing ed campuses. So as I understand, and I swear in today, so I'm not an expert yet on the job, as I understand, we're kind of responsible for all of them. It's not really divided up like, hey, that's my school and that's yours. Our job is to make sure the district as a whole is functioning well.
Okay, and so one of your roles also would be to hire and fire the chancellor, right?
Right.
And that right now is Constance Carroll, correct?
Yeah.
How many students and such are we talking about? Do we know?
Yeah, over 100,000 students. Chancellor Carroll is kind of nationally known as one of the best. And everything I've seen from her, she is incredibly impressive. So I don't think the firing thing will be happening anytime soon. But if and when she does decide to retire, we'd have to replace her, and that'll be a super important part of the job. Because as you all know, the folks who are leading our education institutions have a really big impact on how well those institutions function.
So let me just get a couple more lay of the land style things out. So you are one of 5, and the trustees run across the whole district, right? They're not just elected in a sub-district or neighborhood, right?
Right. So it's similar to the San Diego Unified election, where you run in a sub-district primary, and so there's 5 of those, and then in the general election you go essentially citywide, or the portion of the city that the community college district covers.
All right, and then final, of course, the claim to fame in many ways, as well as that you overcame one of the most prominent Democrats in the city of San Diego, in the region, really. Councilman David Alvarez, now former Councilman David Alvarez, represented District 8 on the San Diego City Council. It was a little bit puzzling to all of us why he decided to run, but it seemed like with his name recognition, with his ability to raise money and stuff like that, he would probably be the favorite for that. And then you were one of the races we clicked on after election night to see if it changed, and it not only got tighter, but flipped to you and then flipped back and then flipped to you permanently, and you held out. You ended up winning by a couple thousand votes, right?
Yeah. So I know that almost nobody outside of our team thought we had a chance to win, but we really did think we had a chance in the beginning, and it's because we knew we were going to do the work of talking to voters one-on-one. That's generally not how the education seats are approached, or quite honestly, most races in the city, unfortunately. But because we knew we were going to do that, we had confidence in our ability to organize. And as we built up that squad of young folks who were really, really passionate about making sure that not only everyone had access to education, but access to the resources they need to excel while they're reaching their educational goals. They were so passionate, and we put in the work, right? And so we talked to about 40,000 folks at their doors, which is a lot, obviously, and it took a lot of work. So on election night, it was a weird place to be, because my campaign manager and I, we talked about it, and she, Marianne was the young lady who ran the team. We had no idea. There's no polling, obviously. So we talked about it, and we said, well, we could lose by 10 or 15 points like everyone expects us to. We also thought we could win by be a couple points ahead. And so those first numbers hit, the vote by mail voters, and we were a little less than 2 points ahead, and the roof pretty much blew off that room because those students were so pumped up and so invested in the outcome.
How do you build a volunteer and campaign team for a pretty obscure race? I mean, I understand people, students, college kids, high school kids who decide that they want to get involved in a mayor's race or a governor's race. How do you get somebody interested in helping you out for community college district?
Yeah. So I wondered the same thing before I started, right? Will people care? But they do. So we went to college classes, and if I would tell them a little bit about myself, my own story, and then what we were trying to do, and they responded in droves, right? They really, really were interested in getting involved. And then the next piece is keeping them involved, right? But to your point, when we went in there was congressional races, there were city council races, and I really didn't know how many people would come, would sign up with interest. The first 2 days at SDSU, I think we had over 100 students sign up from 4 classes, and we ultimately ended up having 25 or 30 pretty dedicated students, and they just were really passionate about the issue. And then their opportunity to own a piece of the campaign and really be leaders and develop their leadership and have a role in every part of the campaign kept them involved. They were making important decisions. They made one of the critical decisions in the last 2 weeks about how to spend some of our money. So they really were driving the effort, and so that's rare. You're not going to usually find that sort of opportunity for an up-ticket race, but it was personally important to them. And then once they got involved, they really were key members of the team, and I think that's why we were able to build that team and get the work done.
One of the reasons I think people were so surprised by David Alvarez being in this race is because I think some of these races for kind of more obscure seats in the education realm are seen as stepping stones for younger people interested in a career in politics. Obviously, he doesn't need a stepping stone, but is that something that has crossed your mind, that this could be, a way into a career in politics over the long term?
Yeah, I definitely don't see it as a stepping stone. And I think that viewing educational seats in general as stepping stones is a real disservice to the students we're supposed to be serving. Even when it was folks who were deciding to support me because they thought that David was blocking a potential stepping stone, I didn't want that to be the reason that folks were supporting me. I mean, we're talking about the people who are leading institutions that are responsible for educating our young people, and in the with respect to the community college district, the population kind of as a whole, right? So no, I don't see it as a stepping stone. At the same time, every career decision I've made since 2008 has been about maximizing impact. So that's my decision to work in the nonprofit sector as opposed to practicing law. That's about feeling like I can make more of an impact there. I think the community college district is a great place to make impact, and my first job is to learn and then do a good job there. And I have no idea what will come afterward, but I'm really focused on doing the job now.
I want to get into some of what you want to do there, but let's talk a little bit more about the race.
Yeah.
One of the sort of theories or narratives about the race is that you were running, there was a couple other people running, and for whatever reason, you didn't make a good impression on the American Federation of Teachers, the teachers union that represents the teachers at this community college district, and that they went out and recruited David Alvarez to run. Did you have tough interactions with them, or how did that go?
I wouldn't say they were tough. They just didn't know me as well.
Right.
I was 34 when I walked in that office the first time. I'd interacted with some of the leadership of AFT, but not the president. He didn't know me. I wasn't ever mad about it. Obviously, I would have really liked to have the endorsement. It would have been easier with the endorsement. But it was never contentious. They never, to their credit, they never went after me, even when we were really pushing, and I never went after them. So I don't know if it was, they are actually very complimentary when they called to tell me that they were going with David. They didn't say anything bad. They didn't say you didn't know your stuff or anything like that. They said, we're going to go with David Alvarez. And I was really surprised. I actually thought it was maybe someone else named David Alvarez. Honestly, that was my first instinct was surely not the council member.
25-year-old guy.
Yeah. Alvarez, yeah. I was like, that's brilliant. That guy's name ID is going to be through the roof. And so I wasn't mad about it, right? I was lesser known. I was newer to the scene, and they thought that then Councilmember Alvarez was their best option, and I'm mad about that.
Yeah.
When you knocked on a lot of doors. In fact, I was telling you when you came in, I think I saw you when I was walking my baby and dogs. I saw you canvassing in my neighborhood 4 or 5 different times over the campaign. When you were at doors, did you have to overcome David Alvarez's name ID? Was that something that you actually had to deal with?
Yeah. First, I want to make sure that folks know that you weren't walking your dog and your baby the same way. You were holding your baby and pushing your baby.
Yeah.
So just, I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea.
2 leashes, 1 baby, 1 dog.
I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea there. So sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes people would really want to know who we were running against. I never brought up his name. It wasn't important, right? We were running because of what we wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they'd say, well, who are you running against? And I would tell them, and they'd say, oh, that's going to be hard. I'd say, I know, but you vote for me, and I'm going to go talk to your neighbor. And I think, bit by bit, that made the difference, right?
Did they even know what the
I would think that
was?
would be the biggest challenge.
Yeah, so we heard a lot of questions like, oh, I vote on this, and what do they do, right? That, if there's one thing that folks take away from our campaign, it's that you can run a field campaign for any race. I mean, if there's no better way to explain what a position does than face-to-face at the door, right? And people were excited by that. The community college district is really popular. People seem to have pretty favorable views of it. They didn't know that they get to vote on the position necessarily. In many cases, they haven't given it much thought, right? And this was an opportunity to tell them what the district is doing, what the district can do, and the opportunities to improve higher education and access to higher education across the city.
It's my understanding that community colleges across the state are undergoing kind of a sea change in terms of how the state funds them, similar to what K through 12 education has gone through with the local control formula. Could you talk a little bit about that and how it might impact schools here?
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest about everything. It's a massive institution, and it's a massive system across the state, and so I'm not an expert on any of these things yet, and it's going to be a while before I am. So I think that there's this shift toward wanting a certain level of performance and certain outcomes, right? Which makes sense. We want to make sure that our students are getting the education that they need. I will say that there's some concern, though, that especially as it relates to community college, that we do the outcomes that we look for are realistic and take into account the many factors that impact a community college student's ability to succeed. And I'll use myself as an example. I went to community college. I was a first-generation college student. I spent 2.5-3 years at my first community college. And then I took a 5-year break, and I never got my AA. I ended up earning my bachelor's degree and then a JD, right? But I get the sense that based on how community colleges are being graded now, Golden West Community College in Huntington Beach, California would be deemed kind of a failure as it relates to my student success. They gave me what I needed in the moment, right? And I wasn't ready yet to transfer for a variety of reasons, where my family was, where I was in life. And so I think it's going to be really, really important that as we want schools to be held accountable and do a good job, which is really, really important, that we're also taking into consideration the many factors. Again, I cannot stress this enough. Community college students come from every walk of life and from every direction. We've got the 17-year-old first-generation college student like I was. We have refugees and immigrants who are trying to establish a life here in the States. We have folks returning to trying to be retrained and return to the workforce in a new job, who may have had a 20 or 30-year career in a sector that's now obsolete. And that is complex. There could be many, many different factors. And then we also need to take into consideration that not everyone needs to get the AA. Maybe it's just improving your English skills just enough to earn some extra tips at work. And so, again, I think it's really important that we keep that in context as we're considering how community colleges in particular are going to be held quote-unquote accountable for the performance of their students.
It's interesting because at the same time, there's also kind of the discussion about whether there should be more 4-year degrees offered in community colleges as well. So it's like the spectrum could be everything from, well, maybe they just need a few basic skills that and we're the place to provide it, up until maybe we should start taking over some of the responsibilities of traditional 4-year colleges.
Yeah. So, I think that conversation about offering bachelor's degrees is really important. I'll push back a little bit that it's not taking over. It's filling a void. So these, in many cases, these are 4-year degrees that are just either impossible or very difficult for a student to get based on what the university system is currently providing. So, and filling a void is very different than taking over. And I think that it's kind of, when it's framed as taking over, that's when, it gets a little more competitive than it needs to be. I struggle, and this, maybe I'm a little naive or too optimistic, and I'm entering office today, so I'm sure I'll get jaded soon. But it doesn't need to be competitive, right? Like ultimately, the goal is to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to get educated and receive the education they need to fulfill their goals. So if there's spaces that are not being filled right now in terms of providing a path to a bachelor's degree, and these are often degrees that pay very, very well. I was actually talking to the chancellor about this. 100% of the students from Mesa who received their bachelor's degree either got a job or got a promotion after they got that degree, and those jobs pay between $80,000 and $120,000 a year, which made me reconsider pursuing a law degree. But that's great, right? And that, again, those are not bachelor's degrees that they could have received somewhere else.
So do you not see a future in which somebody might be able to get, say, like an English degree at a community college? Because right now, as you said, they are like pretty strictly limited to degrees that are very specialized, things like mortuary science that you couldn't necessarily go to, Cal State San Marcos to get, for example. But it seems like the push from the community college side is to expand these degrees and the programs, and wouldn't that necessarily entail some overlap with 4-year schools?
It might, but I also think that there's still a lot of space for degrees where that don't exist, need to exist, or don't exist in the at the level of abundance that we need them to. So I think we're a long ways away before that competition to fill void over, for the same sort of degrees as before we reach that point.
One of the things I always hear about that strikes me is this issue of, one word for them is this opportunity youth, folks out there who are between 18 and 25 who don't have a job and aren't in school. And there's a real emphasis at like the Workforce Partnership and other places of trying to capture them, trying to get them into school or into a career or something. Yet that's still a huge crisis out there, the tens of thousands of people. And so, what kinds of things you did come from a background of, not sure where you were going to go. You might have been one of those for a while. How do you capture them? How do you get them engaged? And do you have any thoughts on how you'll approach that?
Yeah. So this is where the job as a trustee and my work, my new job at the San Diego Youth Development Office kind of overlap. The Youth Development Office helped the Workforce Partnership establish the Opportunity Youth Initiative that they have really done a good job with, and they've partnered with the continuing education system to do that. So I'm always going to focus on how do we prevent the situation from happening to begin with. It's literally why I don't practice law. I figured it out in law school that waiting for folks to be in trouble really is not a good place for me to work. And so you failed a young person several times over if they end up in that situation of being out of work or out of work and out of school in that age range. So we need to fail them less. We need to make sure that they have the opportunities and the resources they need to be on the right path. And then once that number is mitigated, and because we've done a better job, we have to make sure that we're connecting with them to find out what they need. I cannot stress how often I hear and see rooms full of adults telling, trying to theorize about what it is that young people need when we could just go out and have conversations with them. And I think that the answers might be less complicated than we make them, than we might think that they are if we have those conversations. So I think that Carlos Turner-Cortez at the continuing education system is doing a fantastic job right now from everything I've heard. The Workforce Partnership is doing some really good work. And I think that what I'll continuously stress is making sure that we're connecting with the young people who are impacted by these problems to make sure that they're offering solutions to their issues.
Yeah, we've had Cortez in here before to talk about that a little bit. That's a program where it teaches a lot of job skills right away, and you can basically enter it without any barrier to entry. It's just you kind of just show up, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great resource, and it's a particularly great resource for those folks who maybe don't have their high school degree yet, who've fallen on hard times in a variety of ways. Yeah, the barrier to entry almost could not be lower, and they're doing more work to make sure that folks, once they get onto those campuses, have access to resources they need because education, it doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? And this is what part of the campaign platform was, making sure that the essential needs of students are met. If we're hungry, if we're not housed, if we can't get around, if we're injured or sick, or in having trouble emotionally, our education's going to be even more difficult, and maybe even we might not even be able to go. And so I think the continuing education campuses are now starting to identify some of those barriers and make sure that the resources can be found on campus.
Say a little bit more about your day job, because that group has an interesting backstory.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, in October, I started with the San Diego Youth Development Office, and the backstory is pretty interesting. About 10 years ago, a lot of folks who do good work with young people noticed an uptick in youth violence. One of the reasons that they identified for that was a cut in the services and programs offered by the city to young people. And rather than just focus on reestablishing those programs and services, they also said, hey, a lot of big cities have offices of youth development. San Diego should have one as well. Bob Filner was a champion of that idea. And the idea was that when he became mayor, he was going to establish this office, and it was going to have quite a bit of power. And it would really be a great place to make sure that youth were being prioritized.
And this was the vehicle at that time for some of his campaign's discussions about the number of internships and job opportunities that they would offer in City Hall, free transit passes to and from school for students, that sort of thing.
Right. And unfortunately, many good ideas fell by the wayside as he went down, right? And so what I think that taught a lot of us, and we should know this anyway, you never put too much faith in one individual elected official, and you always have an implementation plan in place. And unfortunately, the Youth Development Office is one of those things that kind of fell by the wayside as a result of his downfall. It went to live at the Workforce Partnership for a bit. It then broke out in a more independent nature. And the focus for the past few years has really been on connecting those opportunity youth to work in school. As I come aboard, I think that what we're doing now is taking a step back and having a broader vision. So the goal that we've been talking about is what do we need to do? What needs to be in place to make San Diego a world-class region to raise a young person? I think that ultimately San Diego has a world of potential. I really think it has everything it needs to be a world-class city. But I want us to be a world-class city not because of the Fortune 500 companies that we have or the 5-star resorts, but instead that it's a place where every young person has a real chance to reach their potential, no matter what zip code they come from or what their parents did for work or where they came from. And so we're going to step back and we're going to ask, what does every young person need in order to make that a reality? And we're going to pursue that vision throughout the region.
Well, Sean Elo, he's newly elected. I guess you're going in today, huh?
Today.
Raise the right hand and make the pledge. Well, thank you so much for coming in, and newly elected trustee at the Community College District. We'll see how it goes. Check in with you in a couple of years.
Sounds good, and hopefully I'm not a goat of the week between now and then.
Hopefully not. Thanks. Well, thank you for listening. It's always an honor when I hear from people who are fans of the podcast, and everybody who listens. You're all a special community to us, and we all appreciate your help. If we get through that again, you can consider supporting it at voiceofsandiego.org. Otherwise, have a good week.